Welcome to the sixth in a series of seminars presented by the Aoki Center of UC Davis School of Law. The purpose of the program is to create a network of tribal practitioners, judges, lawyers, workers, clerks, other people concerned with justice in tribal communities. To that end, we invite you to turn on your cameras, enter into the chat box your name, your affiliation, where you work. Our goal is to try and build a network. If we were in the same room with each other, you'd be meeting the people who are sitting next to you. You'd be talking to people as you come and go. Your friends would be introducing you to other people. We can't do that today. So we ask you to turn on your camera, enter your information in the chat box, and you may be able to connect with other people. For those of you who are driving like Steve, we appreciate the fact that you're occupied, but we also appreciate the fact that you're here with us. The UC Davis Law School would like to acknowledge that they occupy the territory of the Winton Nation and have pledged themselves to act in an understanding and knowledgeable capacity dealing with that fact. At the end of the program, an evaluation will be sent to all of you. We ask you to fill out the evaluation. If you fill out the evaluation, you'll be entered into a raffle to win a Pendleton throw. Usually about half of the participants fill out the evaluation. We have 122 people online now, so that gives you a 1 in 60 chance of winning that Pendleton throw. So we encourage you to complete the evaluation when you have a chance. It's nice to see people I haven't seen for a while. I'm going to call out Bertie. It's nice to see you. Last time you were just simply a name up there, so it's nice to see your face. Nice to see a number of other people as well. Last week's winner of the Pendleton throw was Kia Murdoch of California Indian Legal Services. Congratulations to her. Someone from the program will be reaching out to you to get you in touch with the information and how to obtain that throw. So thank you for joining us. Today's speaker, I'm looking forward to because he and I are old friends. We have walked this path together for a long time, and we've held each other up through some trying times. And we have made more than a few people perturbed of us at different times, because our goal is to serve the communities, not simply to go along. So I'd like to welcome Judge Larry King, who is the Chief Judge at Morongo. He is a former Federal Court of Appeals law clerk. He has been Chief Judge at the Colorado River Indian Tribes and has served in a number of other capacities as a tribal judge for other communities. He's also a member of the California Tribal Court State Court Forum and the Arizona Forum as well. So he has a breadth of experience. And I did not tell Larry this in advance, but Larry, I invited all the participants to think about the hardest questions they could ask a tribal judge and save them up for you. So good luck. I know you will do us all proud. And let's see.
Judge Thorne, thank you very much. But the hardest question I had asked me was I was at the Beyond the Bench conference in an elevator with several probation officers from Los Angeles and the presiding juvenile court judge in Los Angeles, to which he asked the question, well, one of the probation officers, I mean, you're a tribal judge, you're a real judge, you have a real court? The presiding judge, juvenile judge, seemed like he was a little embarrassed to be on the elevator with them and didn't know if I was going to go south on him or go north on him for asking the probation officer asking a question. I said, yes, very much. Same way that this judge here can tell you to go pick up a kid I can tell you to go pick up a kid, your counterpart. Matter of fact, why don't you come visit me and we'll talk about how we can protect families going forward. He didn't take me up on that offer, but I looked for him, and since then I've become friends with the presiding judge um, in Los Angeles, and we make sure that he takes into account you have Indian tribes and what they do. Um, can I go? Can I get started, sir?
Absolutely.
All
Go
right, very
for it.
good. Before we really get started, I need to ask everybody a quick question, and you can put this in the chat or everything. If you participate in the NC2A uh, men's basketball championship or the women's basketball championship, are your brackets intact? Just a question to ask going forward. Okay, let's go to the next slide. How I want to get started is Dr. Carl Bell from the University of Illinois quoted this, and all too often I go places and everybody talks about risk factors going forward, and we got to assess risks of families, we got to assess risks of kids. We have all these risk tools. So this is a quote that I truly like. Okay, and I'm a disruptor. I don't believe in the system going the way it needs to go. Risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. Okay, and that's the next slide, Judge. Okay, this slide. So we go to the next one and talk about. I'm going to talk about is 5 different areas. And if you have questions, please put in the chat and I will address the questions, or Judge Thorne will address the questions. We'll keep monitoring. For a tribal court, and my philosophy is more of let's do social justice as opposed and restorative justice as opposed to punitive justice in the English common law way. Because we know lots of tribes, in order to become tribes with the federal government, you had to adopt this cookie cutter constitution where they wanted to put a round peg into a square hole for everybody, despite the fact that we have some hexagons, we have some octagons, and we had some triangles, but they didn't take that into account. They didn't listen to us. They didn't listen to what the community needed. So my 5 strategic areas that I look at when I approach a case in tribal court are: first one, what kind of interdisciplinary, collaborative, or proactive teamwork can we bring to bear? The second area is let's do enhanced oversight and some collaborative problem solving. Let's talk about, in the third area, what's the expedited, appropriate, and effective services that we can provide for the family members. What is our trauma responsive support? Okay. And continuous quality improvement. And that's an area that we all need to have. So, my social service workers, members of the team, judges, how much can we learn and where can we learn it from? Can I go to the next one, please? Okay. I like to think of this as an approach, not a model. Okay. How do we approach things? Makes different changes, small changes. Let's see what we can apply in different many settings. How do we have cross sector or cross discipline coordination? And, what is the research based and evidence informed practices? Now, that last one, I like to say research based and evidence informed as opposed to evidence based. And that's very important in Indian country because there's a lot of stuff that is norm to people that grew up in suburbs in Peoria, Illinois. Okay. Last time I looked, there may be some urban indigenous people in Peoria, Illinois, but I don't know that there are any tribes or reservations, unless the land was stolen, which it was, out of Peoria, Illinois. Okay. A lot of the stuff is based on evidence informed, based on things that we do as tribes in our own practices, but yet they aren't normed, they aren't peer reviewed, and they aren't checked, but yet they work. But they don't get funding because they aren't evidence based. They're evidence informed, but they work. They work for us because that's the things that we do. And we need to bring those into the practices that we have. And a lot of that is culture and tradition and protective factors. So we'll move on to the next slide. Oh, we went that one down too far. Okay. So my first area that I talked about was interdisciplinary, collaborative, and teamwork. Well, let's go back up to the first one, Judge. Next one. No. One more. Okay. Judicial leadership. It speaks for itself. If a judge calls the social service workers, the behavioral health, mental health people, the JOM, the education coordinator, get all those people in the same room and say, what are we going to do for our families? Oh, and by the way, offer them lunch, bring food. Food is very important. Okay. They'll come. And then you can talk about your approach and how you want to deal with that. Um, it, when I was at CRIT, I had a community court that morphed into a community court through our Purpose Area Number 3 grant, our CTAS grant. Originally, it was going to be a healing to wellness court, but that's not what we needed as a community. We needed navigation services. So within that, I had a resource coordinator, and that was my local community coordinator to start out with. But what I asked her to do was to create a community resource expo. And so we got invited not only tribal agencies, but off reservation agencies to all come and offer their wares. Tell us what you do, what kind of services you provide. So therefore, we can figure out what is out there for the members of the community. But what I also wanted to do is I wanted to have the people that are vendors see the community and the community see the vendors. So therefore, they know who they're dealing with and start creating a level of trust between the two. Okay. A lot of times I've had people tell me that they didn't want to deal with our behavioral health people because it was like tell them, tell the community. Well, frankly, everybody in the community knows there's some issues going on, but we respect that. And so here are some third party that are not on the reservation vendors that you can go to. And that helped out. And then let's have an active community team. So one of the things that we did under another grant was uh, had meetings where we bring people in and let's just do little mini trainings. Let's talk about ACEs. Let's talk about epigenetics. Let's talk about a variety of things that may affect families. One of the things that we did is we talked about ACE score, about how do we do trauma informed practices, and then we would travel to do cultural training at Fort Mojave, so we can learn about their cultural issues and see how we can bring those back to the tribe here. Next area that we look at is the enhanced oversight and problem solving. Okay. And that's emphasizes frequent review hearings. And a lot of people says, well, we have the initial hearing, then we come back in 30 days after we have a case plan. And then we come back in 90 days after that, see how they're doing with their case plan and everything else. Well, that's not really being involved. Okay. So if we come back in 2 weeks and we come back in another 2 weeks and we have milestones, how are we meeting the milestones? And see, most likely will happen is you'll have a case plan, or maybe you'll have a workout plan that says you got to do education, you got to find a job, you have to do, say, matrix or moral recognition therapy, and you have to do drug testing for your criminal matter and for your family matter so you can see your kids. But that means that you got to go to 3 different places. Well, that's a lot of work, okay, for that individual to do and to keep track of, understanding that they may have a substance use disorder, that understanding that they may have some brain issues because of the brain chemistry that has changed from the substance use disorder. And the last thing that they're thinking about is trying to keep everything intact. How about let me find where I can get my next dopamine fix derived through substance use. Okay. So if we break it down into small groups and we meet frequently, there's some sort of accountability because they know they're going to come see me. But it's also an opportunity for me to ask questions. And when we do problem solving, and I have CFT and MDT family meetings. So let's have multidisciplinary team meetings. So let's get the behavioral health people in, not just behavioral health, but let's get the physical health people in. So let's find out if do we have any physical health problems with the parents or with the kids. Are they malnourished? Are they eating right? What's their nutrition like? Given the fact that we advertise that you can have Doritos for lunch, dinner, and breakfast, which is probably not the best thing in the world for you because of the number three red dye and orange dye that we all get on them. Those are the types of things that if you can find out those problems or those issues, then we can go forward. So we're buying Doritos. Why? Because we don't have money to buy regular food, or we don't know how to cook regular food. Or maybe, let's go back to some of our protective factors. We don't know how to make traditional dishes that we would make that would make us healthy. Okay. Judge, next one, please. And these are some of the places that we should look at when we talk about, you know, expedited and effective services. Again, the mental health, the substance abuse services, domestic violence services if needed. Children, don't forget the services for the children. Okay. All too often, kids, when we deal with family issues, are removed for some particular reason, which creates an ACE, an adverse childhood experience, which creates trauma, which then can be moved and passed on. Um, and those kids need to be attended to. When we move them, are they visit? Is a visitation happening? What's happening? Are they getting counseling to understand why they can no longer see their mother or their father? Um, and what happens with those children? How are they dealing with in school? Going forward, job training. You know, in this day and age, right now with COVID and online learning, we're gonna have a group of kids that are gonna be behind. Okay, uh, for education and as for jobs, trying to find one, it's gonna be hard. When I talk about COVID and education, we created homeschoolers out of an entire population that was not set up for homeschooling. And we're going to have to suffer for that. So, how do we, as a court, and one of the things before I left CRIT, I would get these truancy petitions. And I started looking at them and I bring families in and I'd ask questions. I bring my education department in. And I said, so tell me something. What's going on? Well, they're not logging on. Well, do they have a hotspot to be able to log on? No, we don't. Well, can they get a hotspot? Because we don't have broadband for them. Do they have a computer? Do they know how to do log on? Can you have someone assist them? And that is one of the things I think sort of helped a little bit. But it's also they don't have, as I said, they're not homeschoolers. They don't have an environment that's set up for them to study. I wish I could have used our gym, but the floor is too precious to be able to do that. To be able to have community centers where they could have studied, had some social interaction, and gone back. But that's above my pay grade. I'm just a lonely little judge. The bridge services also, does the family need, you know, food? What's their housing like? What's their clothing like? All too often, I see social service plans that come in and say, well, we have to have this palatial mansion for the kids to live in and for the mom and dad to live in. If not, we're going to keep the plan going together. And this is one of the things my big brother, Judge Thorne, and I agree on most definitely. It's not about the size of the house, it's about whether the kids can be safe and whether we have loving parents. So let's make sure that when we have services that we create that paradigm and that filter that we view things through, and so that we can go forward. Judge, can I have the next slide, please? When I talk about expedited and appropriate and effective services, the continuum services for children and family, we all, as a tribal court, I see stuff that comes in that says, you know, we have a child that we removed because the mother tested positive for meth. Child was exposed in utero. Child tested positive upon birth. So therefore, we need to remove the child. Okay. They remove the child. They place the child in foster care, possibly kinship, but sometimes not. Uh, and then we lose bonding capabilities. The mother doesn't understand how to be a mother now, um, because she's not been taught that. The opportunity to be a mother has been removed from her because the child's been removed. Um, and so we have just traumatized this family and created problems for this family, and stunted the development and the growth of a child. So when I talk about continuum of services for children and family, we need to identify needs, parents' needs, as early as possible. So yes, the mother may need some substance use disorder treatment. However, the baby needs bonding. So how do we get that, and how do we coordinate that so that we can go forward? And one of the things that I would suggest is that maybe it's a lot of supervised visits, and we have a community team that says, okay, fine, we know you're not going to pass a drug test because that's one of the standards that everybody uses. But we want you to bond with your baby, and we're going to do it under supervised time and supervised hours, and we're going to assist you, okay, going forward. And even still, um, for older children with families that we have issues with, it could be a situation where the parents can't help their kids with homework, and they get frustrated. And so that's when they start lashing out and start yelling and screaming and maybe hitting people because their frustration of being able to help their younger kids is not there. And so, how do we avoid that? By providing services to help them be able to understand how to help their kids and going forward. And so, a lot of that is there, and it should be individualized for the families and for the kids that you have. But that then goes back to that MDT, the multidisciplinary team meetings, and the CFT to find out what's out there and how do you go forward. May I go to the next slide, please? This is very important, I think, and I included this because a lot of times when we talk about strategies